It was past midnight when Ethan realized he had taken a wrong turn. His GPS was frozen on the screen, the little blue arrow stuck in place, as if the map itself refused to follow him any further down this strange, winding road. He cursed under his breath, a small, frustrated sound swallowed by the oppressive silence of his car. He glanced in the rearview mirror, but the road he'd been driving on just seconds ago seemed to have vanished, completely devoured by a thick, rolling fog that clung to the asphalt like a shroud. Ahead of him, the world was nothing but shadows and an unnerving stillness. A chill crawled across the back of his neck, and his knuckles turned white as he gripped the steering wheel. His headlights cut a thin, desperate tunnel through the heavy mist, but it felt like he was driving into nothingness. It was as if the road itself was alive, shifting beneath his tires, leading him somewhere he hadn't chosen, somewhere he didn't want to go. His instincts screamed at him. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. T slowed the car to a crawl. The forest on either side of the road pressed in closer, the dark, skeletal branches stretching out like grasping hands, their bony fingers scraping against the windows with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. He turned the radio dial, desperate for any sound, any voice, to break the suffocating quiet. All he got was static, a relentless, angry hiss that popped and crackled, filling the car with an uneasy, electric hum that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. He reached forward to turn it off, to bring back the silence he had just been trying to escape. But before his fingers could touch the knob, a dim, flickering glow appeared far ahead in the fog. Relief washed through him, a warm wave in the cold sea of his fear. Maybe it was a house, a gas station, another person. But as he drew closer, the relief curdled into confusion, then into dread. It was a single streetlight, just one, standing alone in the middle of this desolate, forgotten nowhere, and underneath it, a bus stop sign. The words were so worn they were barely visible, the paint peeling away from rusted metal. What on earth was a bus stop doing out here? He leaned forward in his seat, his face almost touching the windshield as he squinted through the fog. On the bench beneath the sickly yellow light sat a woman. She was dressed in an old-fashioned coat, the kind you might see in a black and white photograph. Her long black hair was draped over her face, obscuring it completely, and it hung unnaturally still, unmoving in the cold breeze that rattled the leaves on the trees. T sat too still. T was the stillness that got to him. She wasn't shifting her weight, or shivering from the cold, or even acknowledging the sound of his engine as it idled nearby. Ethan felt his chest tighten, his heart beginning to thud against his ribs like a trapped bird. There shouldn't be anyone here, not at this hour, not in this place. He slowed his car until he was right beside the bench, against his better judgment, against every primal instinct screaming at him to floor it and get away. He lowered the window. The cold, damp air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth and decay. He leaned out, his voice cracking slightly when he spoke. "Do you need a ride?" The woman didn't respond. For a long, agonizing moment, he thought maybe she hadn't heard him over the hissing static that still pulsed from the radio. Then, slowly, impossibly slow, she began to turn her head toward him. Her hair parted just enough to reveal her face, and her eyes. Her eyes were black, not dark brown, not shadowed by the dim light. They were completely, utterly black, like polished stones that reflected no light, absorbing everything, including his hope. Ethan's stomach dropped into his feet, slammed his foot on the gas pedal, but the car didn't lurch forward, scolted violently, a sickening thud echoing from the engine, and then it stalled. The headlights flickered once, twice, then died, plunging him into a darkness so heavy it felt alive, pressing in on him from all sides. The radio let out one long, piercing whine that scraped at his eardrums, and then cut out completely. Silence, and then footsteps. At first, he thought it was just the woman, her shoes crunching on the gravel as she approached. But the sound multiplied. It spread out across the fog, coming from every direction. Footsteps all around him, moving closer, slow and deliberate, a funereal rhythm in the dead of night. His breathing quickened into ragged, shallow gasps. He jammed the key into the ignition and turned it again and again, pleading with the dead engine. Come on, start. But there was nothing. Just the useless click of the ignition. His panic, hot and acidic, burned in his chest. Append figures began to appear. They stepped out of the fog one by one, pale, shimmering outlines that solidified into people, men, women, even children, all dressed in outdated, tattered clothes from decades past. Their faces were empty, devoid of any expression, and their eyes were as black as the woman's. Dozens of them, standing at the edge of the lightless road, just watching him. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs so hard he thought it would break through. He fumbled with the locks, slamming them down, and pressed himself back against his seat, as if he could melt into the upholstery. He was praying this wasn't real, that it was a nightmare he would wake from at any moment. He scanned the crowd, his eyes darting frantically. The woman from the bench was gone. He whipped his head around, searching the pale faces, but she wasn't among them. Where did she go? A sound came from inside the car. The faint, soft creak of leather. A sound he knew intimately. The sound of someone shifting their weight in the back seat, slowly, fighting against every instinct in his body that screamed at him not to look. Ethan's eyes drifted up to the rearview mirror. Screamed, a raw, terrified sound torn from his throat. He clawed at the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. He heard the locks click down on their own, a final, metallic sound of doom. The steering wheel turned by itself, the key twisting in the ignition even though he wasn't touching it. The headlights flared back to life, blindingly bright, revealing the crowd of figures standing directly in front of him. They were lined up neatly, like passengers waiting patiently for their bus to arrive. Ethan's hands gripped the wheel, but it wasn't his anymore. The car rolled forward, slow and steady, as the crowd parted into two lines, creating a path for him down the center. As he passed, their heads turned to watch him, perfectly in sync, their soulless black eyes gleaming. The woman leaned forward from the back seat, her presence a block of ice against his spine. Her voice was a sibilant whisper right against his ear. You found the last stop. This road doesn't take you home, it only takes you where you belong. The figures began to close in, pressing their pale hands against the car windows, smearing the glass with something dark and wet that looked like tar. Their faces twisted, their mouths opening wider and wider until they split at the corners, revealing jagged rows of pointed teeth that did not belong to humans. The fog thickened until Ethan could barely see the road, but the car moved forward on its own, relentless, the crowd of horrors following alongside like a shadowy honor guard. Ethan's mind raced, a chaotic slideshow of his life, his apartment, his bed, his friends, and, he realized with a sudden, devastating clarity that none of it mattered anymore. He wasn't going back. He had stumbled into something ancient, something patient, something that had been waiting at this cursed bus stop for longer than he could ever imagine. The woman in the back seat tilted her head, a curious, bird-like motion, and he felt her cold hand brush his shoulder. He couldn't breathe. The thick fog seemed to fill his lungs, his vision blurring at the edges. He tried to scream again, but no sound came out. The car finally stopped. There was no more road. It's only endless, swirling fog stretching in every direction. The figure surrounded the vehicle, pressing closer and closer until the glass began to groan under the pressure. Then crack. The woman leaned forward one last time, her whisper cutting through the silence like a blade. You should never stop. After midnight, the windows shattered. The crowd surged in. Ethan was swallowed whole. The next morning, a delivery truck drove down that same road. The fog was gone. The trees stood silent and still in the bright sunlight. But under the lonely streetlight, on the weathered bench beneath the rusted bus stop sign, sat a new figure. A young man, his eyes as black as polished stones, his face pale and empty, waiting silently for the next traveler to lose their way. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more chills. Stay safe out there, and whatever you do, don't get lost after dark.